Hey team, Richard Tubb here with another episode of TubbTalk, the podcast for managed service providers. Now, I recently interviewed Daniel Shone, the managing director of UK-based MSP Apex Computing. It was a short bonus episode that you can still listen to. We recorded it as we snatched some time in person at Kaseya DatoCon in Dublin, Ireland. Well, that episode got such amazing feedback that I had to invite Daniel back to speak to us without any time constraints, and this time he's not alone. We're also joined today by Chris Gorman, the CEO and Daniel's co-founder at Apex Computing. So Chris, Daniel, welcome to TubbTalk.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. So, Daniel, I mentioned our recent bonus episode of TubbTalk. Got such great feedback, you and I in Dublin as part of DatoCon. Thanks again for being an amazing guest. So, Chris, there's no pressure on you today at all, but let's just say Daniel has already set the bar for being a great guest.
Cool. He's learned from the best.
I love that. Let's jump straight in then. Chris, remind us, who are Apex Computing? Where are you based? Who do you serve?
So we are Apex Computing, and we've been in business for over 20 years now. We're serving Northwest businesses. So we're based out of Salford, just by the BBC, and we're helping all Manchester-based businesses, probably about 160 of them in total, with their cyber security posture, hardware and software procurement, backup, disaster recovery, and overall sort of consultancy, really.
Yeah. How many members of staff did you say at the moment?
So you've caught us on a good day, Richard, which is that we've actually just brought in an operations manager. We're now at 32 members of staff, so it's quite a sizable operation. But Dan and I have been in the business for so long that we've been able to grow it to that over a number of years. It's not been an overnight success.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. Just before we came on air, for the benefit of those of you listening rather than watching as well, Chris was just showing me out of the window at your beautiful offices there. So it's a sunny day in Manchester, but Manchester's a real hub for sort of technology companies and growth, thanks to sort of Mayor Andy Burnham and that, isn't it?
Certainly is. I mean, Manchester, I remember Manchester obviously 20 years ago, so I've lived here all my life. And just the amount of investment going into Manchester, the amount of talent that's coming into Manchester. There's lots of businesses, there's a lot of startups in Manchester. There's lots of opportunity for all sorts of industries, really, but in particular, the MSP.
Yeah, so we're excited to hear a little bit more about the story of Apex Computing, how you both grew the business. But Daniel, many MSPs listening to this episode are sole owners of their business. So I've got to ask you up front, how have you found co-founding a business, an MSP business, and what's your relationship with Chris like?
Yeah, I think that's one of our greatest strengths of allowed growth. Chris and I have different skill sets in certain areas that allow us to really focus and drive a business forward. But after 20 years of running a business, it is a long journey. It's a marathon. It's a bit like a relay race. We can pass the baton to each other and drive things forward when they're needed. And I think importantly about having a business partner and choosing people that you want to work with on that level. Chris and I are on a very similar journey. We're the same age. We have children that are a similar age. So what we're focused on and getting out of a business and what we need from our lifestyle, in effect, is very similar. So, we're driving together with a similar mission, and, that reduces any kind of conflict that you might get sometimes with a partnership. Chris and I have been friends since we were kids, in all honesty. We went to school and to college together. We know each other very well. We know our strengths and weaknesses. We know where we need to support each other. So, a long-term friendship and relationship that Chris and I have built up over the years, and it's helped us build a business to where it is now.
Oh, wonderful. And Chris, for my own clarification, you didn't have separate companies before. Did you co-found Apex together? It wasn't a merger of two businesses before that?
No, so it wasn't. We didn't actually really co-found Apex together. The short history at the very start is that Daniel and I, as he said, we were school friends, and we started before Apex was a company. We started doing building websites, sort of cash in hand. Hopefully nobody's listening to that. But back when we were sort of 15, 16. I then decided to go to university, and Dan went to work for like a local computer shop. And, over a number of years, Dan then set Apex up on his own in 2004. I joined the business in 2008. So at that point, there was me and Dan and Daniel's sister, Jenny, who's actually still within the business. And sort of over that time, we've built it to what it is today. Like Dan said, it has been a marathon, and we put a lot of the work in a long time ago, and we're now starting to see fruits of that labor. But like Dan said, having a business partner at the same level, making decisions jointly, and there's a lot of trust there. And we've got, I think one of the reasons why it does work really well is, like Dan said, we are on that same journey, but also we have very complementary skill sets. So yes, business partners clash all the time. Dan and I clash all the time. But when it comes to complementary skill sets, where where I lack, Dan will excel, and then vice versa. So that's a really good way of sort of bouncing off of each other.
Yeah, and Chris, give us an idea of the division of labor, where your skills lie, where Dan's skills lie, that type of thing.
So I would say I'm not very good with like people and relationships, let's say, and the customers. Dan is very good in front of customers. I'm not very good in front of customers. So that's perhaps somewhere where I'm not that confident, and Dan is. So, how that plays into day-to-day life is Dan does look after the sales function for the whole of the company. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to new business, Dan will be the face of the business in front of the new customers. That's something that's perhaps not within my skill set. And I look over perhaps things that are more like strategy, for example, and where we want the business to be in a couple of years, and how we're going to get the building blocks and the stepping stones that we need to actually get there. So my skill set is perhaps more around the forward planning and organization, and how we're going to get there, and what do we need to do, and what does that journey look like. And Dan's very much a lot more people orientated, and being able to sort of get people singing to that tune, both the customers and the people within his team. Is that a fair assessment, Dan? Or
I think absolutely. Yeah. Chris is excellent at systems and processes and driving forward change in your organization. If you go back, say, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, it's a bit of time has passed, but me and Chris used to mirror each other and more or less do each other's functions. So if one wasn't available, the other could step in. But we made that decision a while back to really kind of separate out and specialize in the areas that we want to drive things forward. And 20 years is quite a long time, and I always say, like, the business is successful now. We've done very well, and it's like getting a freight train up to speed. It's very difficult getting that train moving at first with all the heavy wagons behind it, but now we've got momentum behind it, and the business is really starting to come to life. And it's 20 years of hard work that we've put in to get to this point where we are now. And I think because we started at such a young age, to be taken seriously and have maturity in what you're offering as a service, it was in our early 30s that really started to come to life. Chris and I are both 40 now. So the last 10 years has been the really exciting part of the journey. And we've got a very exciting, I think, 5 to 10 years coming up. We've got some great things in the pipeline.
Yeah, I must admit, I've watched with interest from afar, followed your journey, the pair of you. But what interests me as well is the self-awareness that you've both got, which I'm going to be upfront. I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of MSPs all around the world. A lot of business owners haven't got the self-awareness that you've got to know what they're good at, and to know, as you've just said, Chris, you were perhaps a little bit harsh on yourself, saying, I'm not very good at this, not very good at that. But I think what I was hearing was, I know that Daniel, this comes naturally to him, while there's some things that you have to work really hard at. That's a real skill to sort of acquire, that self-awareness, to know what you're good at and where you should step back.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
we have had a lot of help from people externally, and I know I've talked a lot when I've met yourself and other people about, like, Ian and Stuart. Look at the MSP Growth Hub. Stuart has a particular program about knowing your superpower and finding what you're very good at, and Stuart helped me massively in realizing where my skill set should be and what I should focus on. Part of that program was to help me realize where my strengths were in that as well. So Chris and I have worked on developing that out. For both of us have gone through that journey over last number of years to really kind of get that right and get us rowing in the right direction.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on in the podcast. But you're one of the UK's fastest growing MSPs. As you've said, you're an overnight success story of like 20 odd years there. So Daniel, let's set the stage for the stack at Apex Computing, because MSPs listening to this are going to be interested in the tools that you use. So which tools do you use? Which platform do you use? And who do you partner with to deliver your services?
We're a big PAX8 advocate. We like using PAX8 mainly because of the linkage to billing, support, everything that comes with working with a great partner like PAX8 and helping us develop our business. Chris is probably better on the detail about what products and services we put forward to our customers and why that is. What I try and do in my role is try and simplify it. So working with Chris and the technical team, we have a security stack, which we call the Apex Cybersecurity Sphere. There's a wonderful video that we had made about that on our website if anybody wants to look at how we do that. But we're trying to simplify what the offering is to the customers. And for this month, one of our campaigns is don't think about cybersecurity. So we're going to business owners and prospects and saying, we don't want you to think about cybersecurity. We want to take that responsibility from you and want it to be a managed service. And actually, we want to get away from the conversations about what all these individual products are, because it's changing so fast. Each month is a new cybersecurity product. I mean, the hot topic at the moment is SendMark for DMARC and DKIM. Customers that are in that sphere, we can just notify them that we're adding value, that we're covering them with that service, and we're not having to go through a whole sales process of explaining why we want X amount per month to manage another service. And the customers are getting fatigued, and it's becoming more and more difficult to manage that relationship as a value relationship, because they just see us as asking for money all the time. So we're very much trying to steer away from that, and that's what my responsibility is. Whereas Chris is much more responsible for working with the operations side of the business, making sure those products are correct, they're commercially viable, it works with the way that we invoice out and the contracts and so on. So depending on which way you want to look at it, Richard, probably we can both answer that question differently.
Yeah, well, let's turn to you then, Chris. Let's talk about, the nuts and bolts. Daniel's already mentioned Pax8, who I know you've got a great relationship with, and we have so many MSPs come on TubbTalk who talk about the wonderful relationship with Pax8, both stateside and in Europe as well. But what are the other tools, solutions, and partnerships that you have within the business, Chris?
Yeah, so I'd say, Pax8 is sort of one of our strategic vendors. We have other strategic vendors in like Sonic Wall, Kaseya, Brigantia, Chronis, ThreatLocker as well, and Huntress as well. So we've got quite a lot of strategic partners there. And, it's not just about buying X and selling X. It's what else is involved in that relationship. A lot of these partners who we consider strategic, they help us with marketing, they help us with technical enablement. And it's really all of those different things that determines whether or not we see them as a strategic partner.
Yeah, and Daniel, I'll turn to you, like the relationship side of this. We touched upon this in our bonus episode that listeners can still pick up and hear. But when it comes to the relationship with the vendors, I get on my soapbox. I make no bones about it on this podcast, and I talk about you can't grow your MSP beyond a certain level unless you build up great relationship with your vendor partners. So speak to that a little bit. What, those relationships, how important are they as this juggernaut that you've built now keeps getting bigger and bigger?
I think there are certain barriers you've got to break through when you're growing an MSP, and where a lot of people get stuck is like the sub-1 million pound turnover barrier. And I think one of the best ways to break through that barrier is to speak to your suppliers and vendors and work out, which ones are prepared to help you grow your company. So a long time ago now, Tech Data, TD Synnex now, they helped us on our journey to become a Microsoft Gold partner. They gave us funding for MDF, and they helped us to really push forward with what at the time was becoming partly Azure and modern workplace transformations. And obviously since then we started working with Pax8, and they've been absolutely fantastic. We did the Azure Ladder program this year and last year with Luke Pickle there, who's just been amazing. We've now got the Microsoft Azure infrastructure accreditation for the business, which is difficult for an MSP of our size to get because of the requirements around it. So we're really proud of that. But when you're trying to grow and get through those hurdles, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Choose partners that are going to come on board and actually get boots on the ground as well in your office. So at the time, Tech Data were very much on the ground in Apex offices with Pax8. Luke and Jono, our amazing account manager, Gideon there, Alex Bermudez, we've all been to the office and spent time understanding what makes Apex special and how they can contribute to it. And equally, we say to the likes of Pax8, what makes us a special partner to you? I mean, I was at we have a board that does some of our key objectives for the year that Chris has put together, and one of them was to become a top 10 partner for Pax8 in terms of spend in the UK. And I remember speaking to another MSP owner at an event recently. He's like, "Oh, why are you telling them that we're going to just know that you want to spend the money with you? It's like we've got them over a barrel." I just couldn't understand the concept of doing that. Yeah. But we're showing that we want to treat them as an absolutely key partner. We're serious about helping them reach their objectives, and in return we want them to help us reach our objectives, and that relationship suddenly becomes a partnership, and it grows, and it's something wonderful. It's not about saving 10 pence on a backup license, or, are you 5p cheaper on your NC renewal of this, that, or the other? It's about where's the extra value, where we're going to do MDF funding together, where we're going to do training with staff, and what do you need us to hit this year in terms of targets for PAX 8 to be seen as a success internally. Let's try and get some of those in our key objectives as well. So when you build that friendship with a supplier and you build that relationship out, it becomes really fruitful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a philosophy that I took with my own MSP back in the day, making that commitment to specific vendors and growing. And, not every MSP does it. And almost thankfully, because if everybody did it, of course, there'd be more competition. But it is remarkable what you're doing. So, yeah, keep up that brilliant work. And Chris, let's zoom in on one of the other vendor relationships that you mentioned there, Huntress. So we've had folks from Huntress on the podcast before. How have you found the relationship with Huntress? What does that partnership do for your business?
Okay, so I've heard about Huntress before, but it's only really since they set up like the UK presence and the UK team that they've actually been there's more of a presence felt, both at sort of industries and all sorts of stuff. And since that, we took notice and we onboarded Huntress probably maybe 3 to 4 months ago, and it's been absolutely amazing. The UK team that they set up, fantastic. We've had regular comms from all of them, and they just helped us in all aspects. So that's really what we in terms of the relationship, that's really something that massively helped us, because when you onboard any new product, sometimes the vendor is like, there's the product and follow this and it'll happen. With Huntress, it was a completely different experience. They handheld us through all of our different sort of challenges, whether that was technical enablement, whether it was marketing, or whether it was sales enablement. So, yeah, I mean, the relationship with Huntress has been extremely good so far.
Excellent.
If I can just add to that, Richard, I think Chris and I are in effect accidental business owners. We started off in tech and we built this business, and we really focused on all these areas, such as how easy it is to onboard, the support around at the MDF. I think a lot of MSP owners, they are technically focused, and they're really focused on what is the absolutely best Swiss Army knife, in effect, with all the tools in there and how it technically works. And they just get focused on the technical outcomes of these products, and they're not really looking at commercials as much as it should be. And maybe, how we're going to support your company, how it's going to integrate, particularly on smaller MSPs. And I think, one of the things that we flipped quite early on was to be looking at it that way, instead of just being looked at. It might not be technically the best product, but it's the best product for all customers because of the support and everything else that goes around it.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense for me. Chris, going back to you. So tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts. So many people who are listening are going to be familiar with Huntress, are going to be familiar with the idea of like outsourced cybersecurity to a degree, but others are not going to have a clue who Huntress are. So tell us the nuts and bolts. What Huntress actually do for Apex Computing? Which of their solutions do you use?
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, they've actually got 3 and one that's about to come through. So the solutions that we use at the moment is we have it's like an MDR. So it's like an agent that sits on all of the devices that we support, and that is actively threat hunting. So if something suspicious happens on that endpoint, it'll go to Huntress, and this is the good bit. They will almost like triage all of these events and all these things that are happening, and they'll categorize it in terms of like a priority level. And based on the priority level, we can get certain things to happen. So for example, if there's a critical alert, that's something pretty serious that's going on, that can actually lock that endpoint down so that our techs can investigate that. So that's one product, the MDR. The second product that we use is like it basically monitors the 365 identity. So every one of the 365 identities for on the platform, it'll monitor for specific suspicious activity. So some of the things it's looking for is like suspicious sign-ins, forwarding rules, basically hallmarks that something malicious is happening. And a similar sort of concept, depending on the category of the alert, we can like lock that account so we can investigate it. But the most important thing is these things are happening. Both those services are happening 24 hours. So we're not a manned office 24 hours, but we are able to offer that to our customers. So if something is happening at 1 a.m, it can, it could lock or alert somebody for investigation when we come back in the morning by our techs. So in addition to that, products that we don't use, I believe that they do a like a phishing sort of simulation and training platform, and then they're about to release or in the in like initial stage of releasing like a more like a SIEM-based product.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. But Daniel, you know, you and I have spoken about this before. I built my own MSP off the back of partnerships with companies like Huntress and that back in the day. I'm a huge fan of it. So you don't need to persuade me, but there's going to be people listening to this and going, oh, if an MSP outsources any aspect of their business, they're not really an MSP. What would you have to say to those type of people about, you know, the relationship that you've got with Huntress? So, for instance, have you ever had any pushback from clients about outsourcing aspects of your business to the likes of Huntress?
See, for me with Huntress and that relationship, I don't see it as outsourcing the service, because we have our own security engineers here. And if Huntress, the software and the solution identifies something, yes, a report goes to our engineers, but it's sent up to our engineers to work with the customer and see that through to resolution. And it's not realistic to have people in the UK monitoring and sifting through endless logs at 2 o'clock in the morning. So you have to have a solution like Huntress, which a lot of it is automated, taking responsibility for that. I know that they will have a certain element of human interaction once it's raised up inside the Huntress team, but then they're not contacting our end users, they're contacting us and our service desk, and we're then seeing that through to resolution of the team. And the people that are in our team that are contacting our clients when there is an incident, they're known, liked and trusted by the customers. So it's a very personal service still. And when we haven't had Huntress in the past, and maybe we've had them looking at logs, things can get missed. It can take too long to find it if it gets found at all. So for me, it's not, we're not shifting that responsibility. We're just enhancing it with Huntress's tool set.
Yeah, got it. And can you give any examples of pushback? Sorry, not from pushback from clients, but where clients have been saved by Huntress from some sort of cybersecurity headaches?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good examples where, for instance, we've had a client that's had a notification that their 365 account has been doing something unusual. It's picked up that a unusual mail rule has been activated and certain emails been moved to a deleted folder, and that's where there's been a breach that's occurred, and the hacker has tried to hide the fact that they're communicating maybe with a supplier, and anything that comes back automatically goes to deleted items, so that the person that's been compromised isn't aware that conversation is going on. So it's alerted us to that. It's alerted us about strange activity maybe with VPNs from a machine to foreign countries. It's alerted us to where maybe a company's had a member of staff working abroad when they've not been notified their employer of it, or strange occurrences like that as well. So obviously it's difficult to talk about it because these are real instances and people might be watching, but some very interesting outcomes from putting Huntress in place. Yeah,
interesting. Chris, let's turn to you. So you mentioned the SIEM solution that Huntress are putting out there. Is that something you're looking at for Apex? Because the way you use the Huntress services, it really feels like any MSP who perhaps doesn't work with a partner like Huntress could get overwhelmed by the amount of data that comes through there and miss the important things. So is SIEM something that you think is required at the SMB end of the marketplace?
It's I don't want to say it's controversial, but I think some of the challenges that MSPs have is like trying to get some of these products in, get the customer to buy into them. Because I think, cybersecurity really, it's not just about one product, it's about multiple products. I think Dan, you talk about as well. Everyone talks about it as a bit like an onion with all these different layers and all these different products. And yes, Huntress is definitely a part of that. There's other products that we have that are part of that stack as well. And trying to get some customers will buy into the whole thing, and they take your advice straight away. There's no questions. And then you've got a sliding scale really, where at the other end, you've got businesses, certainly in the SMB side of things, where perhaps they don't do budgets, maybe they're too small to have a financial budget, for example. So if you go to them and you want them to uplift their IT spend or security spend by 20% for a new product, it's sometimes going to be quite a hard sell unless you do a lot of education first. So where I'm sort of leading with it is that because you've got these different layers, I think getting customers to buy into the 365 side of the Huntress thing and getting them to buy into the EDR side of it, the endpoint detection, I think the next step is to try and then get them to buy into the SIEM aspect. So I think I'd say it's horses for courses. Do I think that everybody should have all of these products? Definitely, every UK business. The reality is that small businesses, the financial aspect may not be as mature as, say, a medium-sized business, and therefore trying to get different products across the line, you've got to do a lot of education and getting to understand what the risks are. Once they understand clearly what the risks are, then they can decide whether or not they want X product. But for Apex, we very much see it as like this big onion, and the more security products that we can layer in there, SIEM being the next one, the better really for the customer cybersecurity posture.
One of the challenges we have is that business owners are a bit like magpies. So when it comes to cybersecurity, they'll go for the shiny things that maybe we've seen something in BBC News, we've read something about ransomware, all of a sudden maybe someone's talked about zero trust. And the problem is they're looking over here when they should be looking over here. And I always say to business owners, like, you've got to trust us as professionals to manage that security as a service. And you could go on forever and spend an infinite amount, but we have our Apex Cybersecurity Sphere priced at, circa around £30 per user per month. And for that, we'll put a range of products and services and people behind it, like our security engineers, making sure that's managed and taken care of. And as these things change, we give examples of, like, we put Huntress in that stack. It wasn't in the stack 12 months ago. We put SendMark in that stack. It wasn't in the stack 12 months ago. There are some products that we've moved out because we felt they weren't efficient. I won't mention what they are, but we've swapped around. So it's just taking that away from the business owner and getting them to trust us that we're making the right decisions, because business owners make bad decisions based on limited resources and information that we've read online typically. And that's the conversation I try and have with them.
Yeah. And Chris, I'll turn back to you for a moment. So clearly relationships, partnerships are very important to Apex. We can understand that. You've mentioned about your relationship, partnership with Pax8 as well. So the other thing that I'm picking up from our conversation is that you review your tools quite often. So Chris, tell us about what are your thoughts on, how Pax8 are pulling together almost like a marketplace or a dashboard of all of these different solutions. What does that look like for how you review your tools often? Is there anything surprising come out of that relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been a Pax8 partner now since 2022, I think it was. So, not that long in comparison to, how long we've been in business. But I think back then they were maybe considered the new kids on the block. Certainly maybe in the UK market. I don't know whether that's necessarily true or not, because I know there's a lot of partners pre-2022, but that's when we joined. And what we've seen from Pax8 since then is innovation. So, the latest innovation is this whole marketplace thing. And what we've enjoyed off them has been sort of a huge factor in our growth. So what we enjoy is this appetite for the innovation, and that's the main reason why we sort of partner with Pax8, because we can see that they're innovating. Whether it is the new marketplace or the AI that they're building into it or changing the platform. Because we can see that they're putting time, effort, budget, money into innovation. We know they're a partner to sort of strategically align with. But yeah, the marketplace is really, really interesting stuff, and the AI that they've built into sort of assessing your estate and which products are the best fit for certain clients and stuff. It's absolutely huge for the industry. I'm not sure whether there's many other vendors that are sort of at that level where they're really wanting to innovate into all those sorts of areas.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me, just a viewpoint where Pax8 are going with their marketplace, how they curate the apps and the vendors that they bring to it. I'm not sure every MSP actually understands the impact that's going to have on the market as a whole. So it's really interesting to me to see a real progressive, forward-thinking company like Apex a partner in there, because I do think it's the future of the managed service industry. And obviously we wait to be proven differently, but the fact that Apex are going down that road as well speaks volumes to it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, let's shift gears slightly from, we've talked about relationships with vendors, we've talked about relationships with clients. Let's talk about the relationships you have with the other big important part of your business, which of course is your employees, your members of staff. So I've seen you post a lot of video interviews with Apex members of staff. I absolutely love this. What prompted that type of project or that ongoing thing, and what benefits do you get from it?
Well, I've got to give the credit where it's due, really, to Chris Bell, who's our outsourced marketing manager at the moment with Televate and Tara Jane, who many of you know. So he's working part-time for us. And one of the things he really wanted to work on was that a lot of clients are ringing in, speaking to people on the phone, maybe doing tickets over email with our or people at Apex, and we're not really getting a personal touch with them and not understanding who they are as people. So by creating those videos, I've had a lot of clients say to me, "Oh, it was really nice to see person X or person Y on that video, see who they are as a person, get a bit more information about them." So it's kind of made it a bit more personable, and makes it kind of, I think it makes the customers a bit more understanding when we're dealing through difficult problems if they're relating to the person they're working with. So Chris Bell's initiated that, and that's been really successful. I think in just making us getting the clients to know who's actually doing the work for them and who's there behind the scenes.
I think it's absolutely powerful. Can I ask, how have the staff taken to it? So there's many of us work in our industry, and I only wrote an email about this morning to the community, the fear that MSP owners have of getting in front of the camera. But my goodness, I can imagine there must have been, I'm not going to say pushback, but maybe some reluctance from some of your team to get out from behind the keyboard and behind the camera instead.
Yeah, we did get volunteers to do it, but I did have the odd one where we were coming back from maybe from a toilet break and go, just come in this room for a minute and just quickly say your name and what your job role is, and that's it. That's all you need to do. And then we'd ask them just one more question. But if anyone, we have a social media opt-out policy as well, so people can say if we don't want to be involved in those kind of projects. But all in all, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? And people enjoy getting involved and being put on the spot a little bit sometimes, not too much, but a little bit. Wow. Just on those interviews, the ones that I think have been really successful is we've chosen key clients that we've got great relationships with to do case studies that are 2 or 3 minutes long. And we've got on our website, we have specific verticals that we work in. And on each of the vertical pages, we might have an interview with a client in that space. So if I get a call from an accountant, for instance, I might say, well, have you seen our specific landing page? Because on that, there is a interview of an accountancy firm of a similar size to you that's had a similar problem. Or if you come in to do a meeting with us about a new business meeting, I'll say, well, have you seen, well, just while you're here, just a 2-minute video of someone similar to you that's worked with us. That's been really powerful, having those videos made, and they're quite low cost to make if you've got someone that's reasonable with a video camera and a tripod.
Yeah, and again, I love that approach. And what we'll do in the show notes for this episode, for listeners, we will include links to some of the videos that we're talking about here, both the case studies with the clients and the employee videos that you do as well, both of which are awesome. So, kudos for that. You are building, or you have built, an incredible culture within the business. So, Chris, how would you describe the culture at Apex? And before you answer that, let's, clarify, when it comes to culture, a lot of people think, oh, it's just a tick box exercise. That's clearly not the case at Apex. So what is the culture at Apex?
Yeah, I think before I answer that, I think you are right. I think our USP is our culture, and the stuff that you're just talking about with Daniel there over the videos, being able to get the members of the team involved in those videos really showcases our culture and what we've built to our customers, the audience that we want to serve. So that's it's really important to get that done, and that definitely is sort of one of our USPs. But how would I describe it? So sometimes culture can be quite difficult to describe, but I think there is definitely 4 words I would say that describe our culture, and they are welcoming, supportive, collaborative, and nimble. So that is how I would describe the culture at Apex, and yeah. That's it, really.
I love it. What sort of effort went into that? Is that something that organically sort of naturally sprung up, or did you, I'm suspecting you went through a process of clarifying that with maybe your coaches or something like that?
Yeah, it is a difficult one, and it's not I think I've said this before, it's not like you can't define your culture and then that's it, or define your values and that's it. You've got to sort of embed these things, and they evolve over time, don't they? So the journey for us was, we started by setting what values we we wanted. We embedded the values, and I guess on the back of that, and this is over a number of like months and almost years, the culture is formed by promoting and embedding the values, and then you can define it, which is how we would perhaps define it today. That's the journey that we went on anyway.
Yeah. Daniel, I mentioned you're one of the UK's fastest growing MSPs, so you are to be congratulated on that, but it does come with challenges. So how do you handle maintaining, the strong culture that Chris has talked about, that you've sort of grown there, but whilst also growing your business, adding new employees and clients? How does that work?
Well, I'm specifically focused around sales, marketing, the account management team. Chris has put a huge amount of work into developing out the culture, the mission of a business, the value set. We've got like a commandments board. We have a behaviors board of things that are important for the team, behaviors that are expected. But when Chris has created that and he's driven that into the business as part of his role, which he's made a great success of, I can use that in my team in things like performance management. If it's maybe something where staff hasn't met expectations and they go into a PIP, we can use the values and reflect on that. So it has been a really important thing that the business has been through, and Chris has made a huge success with the values. The staff know them, they can recite them, they know what they mean, they're not just saying words. So yeah, it's really important. And I think also we had 10 objectives for this year that Chris has set out as part of his mission, and to drive the business forward and reach those key objectives. And that's kind of fed into the values and where we want to be as a business. But that's probably Chris's point to talk about more. But I think, the work that Chris has put in there is really has driven growth in the business and got us all rowing in the same direction as well, no matter what department you're in.
Well, Daniel, let me ask a sales-based question on that. So I've observed that MSPs like Apex, who have built a really strong culture, you attract really good, employees, you attract really good clients. But from a sales perspective, does that culture, those values, does it also help you understand where perhaps a potential new client is not a good fit to work with Apex? Have you had any instances of that?
Yeah, maybe not reflecting on our specific values, but it is important. A client sees us as a trusted partner, and it's a relationship where we're building excellence for them in IT, and they value what we're doing as a service. If a client sees it as transactional, well, I just want to pay the least amount to be able to ring a number if the printer isn't working. I don't want to be setting out an IT roadmap. I'm not wanting to listen to your recommendations. I just want to treat it as a cost center. And that isn't a good fit for us as a client. And either we won't take them on in the first place, or quite soon within that journey we'll realize we're not a good fit, and we'll help them to move on to a partner that is right for them, because there are IT firms out there that do want to do reactive IT support, that want to do it on a budget. It's not where we're at. We're wanting to help professional companies that want a professional service and want to paint a picture of what good looks like in terms of IT and security, and they want to help go on that journey with us. So we do have a ideal client and the type of clients that we want to work with. It's not necessarily on size of client or spend necessarily. It's about having that mindset. So, some 5-10 user businesses are absolutely in that correct mindset, and we work with them and we have great relationships compared to some of the large clients that maybe, 100, 200 plus users. As long as they're on that journey with us, that's where we bring things to life and add value.
Yeah. And Chris, still on the subject of culture, there's going to be many MSPs listening to this, and I was perhaps one of them back in the day as well, where you look at your entire client base, there's going to be some clients you absolutely love working with, others are just sort of there, you hardly hear from or whatever, but then you have a bucket of clients who just are not a lot of fun to work with. What's the vibe within Apex? Have you got any of those type of clients? And obviously I don't need you to name them, but do your engineers typically enjoy the work they do, or do you find because of the culture you sort of eliminate those type of pain in the backside clients?
Yeah, I think we definitely listen to what the staff say. So what we might do sort of every 6 months is we might do a bit of a survey of the customers internally, and we'll involve different areas of the business. So that's not necessarily a leadership team job. That's a spokespeople from all the different departments, and get a bit of a feel for which customers are perhaps slipping off where we want them to be. So, for example, like Dan said, they see it as a cost. The mildly abusive They all they don't pay the bills on time, for example. All of these different things. So we try and get a bit of a feel across the whole company, across the whole team, as to which customers might be slipping outside of what we expect, and then we have a plan typically on how to approach them. And yes, a lot of the time that simply leads to us sort of ending the agreement with them, because if we've got people in different teams all complaining about the same customer, then we've got to listen to them. And I think that feeds into our culture. We listen to them, we take action on it, and that's why we have sort of this supportive and collaborative culture that we have, really. So yeah, unfortunately sometimes, and when you've been in business 20 years as well, customers that might have joined you at the very start, they've come with you part of the way of the journey, but then they perhaps slipped off the journey, and they're perhaps not a good fit for where we are now or where we want to be. And so, yeah, there are sometimes challenging conversations that have to be had about ending that relationship. But, thankfully, I defer that to Dan. Dan has those conversations.
And it sounds a bit cutthroat, but it's always great and a great outcome, because I'll typically sit down with a client and I'll say, look, you're on a different journey now, or we're not the right fit, but this partner is absolutely perfect for you. There's some local IT firms. And I say, look, I'll even come in for a first meeting for half an hour with you, set up a Teams meeting, and just see if this is the right fit for you as a business. Because, I want you to be happy. The last thing we want is a client that's unhappy and then leaving us negative feedback on Google or wherever, Trustpilot, whatever these things are. You don't want somebody unhappy in there causing you problems. So we make sure that we get the right person to take over from us, and they move on singing our praises and thinking how wonderful we were for being honest with them and identifying who was right for them.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, Daniel, because lots of MSPs I speak to who bemoan some of their customers, and we all have them, of course we do, but I actually say to them, refer them on to someone else, and they go, I would never wish them upon.
No, we always we have to close the door, right? You have to leave people thinking positive things about you and your business. You can't, even when a client leaves us and we maybe don't agree with what that reasoning is, or we feel we've been dealt with unfairly, we always stay ultra positive. We want to turn that around, so when they have gone, they speak about us positively, and they might recommend us or come back to us in the future. The worst outcome you can have if you leave somebody speaking badly of you.
I think as well, like when we get a brand new client in, it's really good for the business, and it's good, financially for the revenue, and it's good for like the leadership team as such. But when you get rid of a bad client, it really helps the people that are actually the customer facing parts of the business. So the people dealing with the technology, the people dealing with the account management, and it's actually really liberating to get rid of a bad customer for the team, for the team morale. So yeah, definitely something that we continually do continually do. So it's really important and definitely very liberating getting rid of a bad client. Yeah,
Chris and I, sorry, just to add, because I think it's an important bit. Chris and I have invested a significant amount of money in external training on customer service as well, for the service desk, the sales team, the administration team, the finance team, because it's easy to get into that kind of rut of just seeing them as almost the customers as internal parts of our business that we're providing a service to. We've got to see them as a customer. So that investment as well has really improved things in that area.
Yeah, thank you. And Chris, all I was going to say is to totally back up what you've said. When I ran my MSP business, whenever we'd fired a client or whenever we'd moved a client on, in a relationship, there was always members of my team that turned around and went, I can't believe it took you that long to do it. So your internal team know better than you often which clients are not a good fit for you anymore. So I love this concept that you've got of sort of polling internally and finding out on an ongoing basis. As my great friend and mentor Carl Palachuk would say, you've got to weed your garden on an ongoing basis. And so couldn't agree more with what you're doing there. Yeah. So let's change tact a little bit here. Let's go back to cybersecurity. So Chris, if I understand correctly, you recently appointed a head of cybersecurity, Nathaniel Gill. So many MSPs, perhaps don't partner with cybersecurity experts like Huntress, or they've got a head of cybersecurity, but not many have both. So tell us about the thinking behind that appointment.
I think the first thing is Nathaniel has actually been with Apex for nearly 8 years now.
Oh, wow. Cool.
He started very much as a tech, and as his roles evolved, he was promoted into head of cybersecurity, and he has been in that role for a number of years now. But that is absolutely pivotal in being able to deliver, all of these products that you've said. So why do we have both? Well, having like an internal head of IT security, Nathaniel, it's like a massive game changer for a business. So, when we want to deliver, say, consultancy or security strategy to our clients, being able to do that through somebody in-house who knows the tools that we use and knows what we can deliver and how we can deliver it in Nathaniel, that is like massively beneficial. And yes, we outsource stuff because there's certain stuff that needs to be outsourced, is like the alerting. We do have to rely on external vendors, but you still need that person internally to be able to pull that together and head that up. And that's what we have in Nathaniel.
Yeah, I love it. So you've promoted internally there. Somebody who's been with you for a little while. So why did you think Nathaniel was, without putting you on the spot, why was Nathaniel a good fit for this?
So I guess that's one of the things that we do here at Apex is that where an opportunity becomes available, it always goes internally first. There is maybe one or two exceptions, but ordinarily, if we've got a role in another department or there's a promotion, it goes internally first, and we really try to find somebody internally. So that's the first thing. But why Nathaniel? So back in the day, a number of years ago, Nathaniel came to us with a proposal as to how we could improve a certain area of the business around security. And it was a really good proposal and it worked really well. We implemented it and we got behind it as a business. And on the back of that, that naturally led into a security-based role. So I guess the reason why Nathaniel is head of security here at Apex is that he's proved himself internally. We've invested time in him. He's invested his time in the business. And as a result of that and the fruits of that labor, he's had that progression within the company.
Oh, that's marvelous. And pass my congratulations on to Nathaniel. I hope he's not blushing too much that we're focusing on him in this episode, talking about it. So
I'm sure he'll love it.
Hey, Daniel, in our bonus-ode, you spoke, and I know I put you on the spot at the time, but you spoke so passionately about the value that having mentors and coaches brings to not only you and Chris, but Apex as a business as a whole. We've already touched upon the fact, you speak super highly of Stuart Warwick and Ian as well. Can you speak to that? What do those type of relationships mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, they've helped us through specific parts of our journey to reach a goal. And likes of Daniel Welling, who we've worked with before, Ian and Stuart, massively helped us with our financials and some of the key aspects of growing out our senior leadership team. Then with Ian and Stuart, huge part of their offering is about the community as well as the support that they offer the people on that journey with them. They have very specific parts of a program that can help you, whether it's self-development, development of a team, and you can go to them and say, maybe what that problem is in your business and where you want to get to. I think the one thing I would say that Chris and I have learned over the years is that if you're going to invest in one of these programs, you have to do what you say and set yourselves key objectives and deadlines. And as long as you meet those deadlines when you set that with your coach, you will grow as a business. I think sometimes people make the mistake of entering into these programs and then just keep missing deadlines. Is always a reason for not doing something, always a reason for not getting there. Everyone's got, good reasons for not doing things. It's just, you have to, if you're going to put time and effort and money into working with these people, you have to make sure you hit those objectives. And when you do, you get the growth patterns that Chris and I have enjoyed over the last, 5 to 10 years of working with people like Daniel Welling, Stuart and Ian, and more recently, Darren Strong at Scalable. And I think these coaches all have different services and value to offer. And I think you can work with them as long as you do what you say, you absorb that out of them, you come to the end of that journey, and then you might choose to work with somebody else. So we had a great run with Daniel Welling, really, really valuable time with him, great run with Stuart and Ian, got a huge amount out of that program. And Darren Strong now is kind of involved with us at a laser focused level, almost boots on the ground, specific challenges we've got in our business, helping us hit those targets. So we've been very fortunate with the people that have come across our path and gone on the journey with me and Chris We've not really had anything bad to say about any of those journeys. It's been wonderful, and I'd encourage any MSPs that are growing not to reinvent the wheel, but to get on these programs and speed up your journey to success.
Yeah, and if anybody listening is interested in finding out any more about some of those names that have been mentioned there, we've got TubbTalk interviews with Daniel Welling, and I'm just about to do have a conversation with Ian Luckett, who's never been on the podcast before, and I've known Ian for a little while now, so that's surprising. So he'll be thrilled though that you're speaking so well of him, and we're lucky in the UK, aren't we? You know, you mentioned Darren Strong as well. We had on the podcast a few weeks ago. We've got such a wealth of really smart people who give sort of freely of their time and energy to help other MSPs to grow as well, Daniel. So we're very lucky.
Our industry needs it. I said before, the majority of people that own MSPs are accidental business owners, and the wealth and value that you get from these people coming and helping you, it can be a real game changer.
Yeah,
I think there is something to add into there as well, which is that, yes, there's actually a step before that, which I know, Richard, you're a huge promoter of, and that's the Tech Tribe. So back in the day, in 2018, I think it was, maybe 2017. So we joined the Tech Tribe, and there was a lot of content support on there for something that at that time was more suited to our budget. So you don't need to, like Daniel said, it's really important that you involve these external consultants, mentors, agencies, whatever it is, but there's something out there for everyone. Yeah. And a good starting place might be for perhaps a sub-1 million pound business that doesn't quite know where to start on that journey. A good starting place is the Tech Tribe.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit more about that. So Tech Tribe, I'm a huge fan of what the illustrious leader of the Tech Tribe, and Nigel Moore, has done with that community. For me, it's a no-brainer. We've got other communities like CompTIA, but Chris, Apex are big contributors to the managed service community as a whole. I've seen you speak at partner events before. You're a big part of Network Group, SBSC Northwest, up there in Manchester, the UK's longest-running peer group for MSPs. So what benefits do Apex get from your investment of time and commitment to these various groups?
Yeah, I think it's being part of the community. So when you're in the community and you attend these events and you go on the Tech Tribe and all these other things, you're understanding a lot of things. So you're understanding trends, you're understanding sort of business challenges that other MSPs are facing, perhaps ones that are larger than you that you're going to hit at some point, or smaller than you, where you can help them. So it's really being part of the community. You really get to understand the industry and sort of all those challenges that all of the other MSPs are having. And, a lot of them are quite similar. And what you will find in this industry is everybody is willing to help. I mean, like some companies are like complete open books. Apex, a complete open book. We speak to MSPs on a regular basis, and it's complete disclosure. And we're not unique in that approach. You visit the community and you'll find everybody is like that. Everybody is almost like an open book, and everybody wants to help each other, and everyone's happy to share. And that's really what we get from communities. Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris, you mentioned trends. Let me put you on the spot for a moment here. Are there any new technologies that you're finding exciting, either from a geeky perspective or a business perspective? What are they? Share with us.
I think people are just going to say AI, aren't they? And that's going to be my answer as well. I mean, it's so exciting. It's unbelievable. I'm not really that much of a techie anymore, but I can see how it's going to sort of change the industry, really. I mean, in terms of Apex internally, the operational efficiencies that we can create through like good use of AI are almost endless. And what that means is that we can get our staff to focus on more of the personal approach. They're not getting bogged down in stuff that we could automate and use AI to help solve, and they can focus more on the relationship and building that personal approach and really honing in on our USP as Apex Computing. So yeah, I think that's something that we're heavily spending time on at the moment, but there's not really any. It's too soon to give any insights on any of that, I would say.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I'll look forward to catching up with you in the future around that. AI is an absolute game changer, and I think the MSP industry, if anything, has probably been slow to adopt and to realise the potential for AI. So there's a lot catching up we've got to do there. Guys, this has been an incredible interview. Daniel, I'll turn to you because we've covered so much ground today. So for any of your peers, MSPs who are listening to this, how would you summarize the key to Apex's success? What makes a good MSP like Apex really tick?
I think you have to imagine the customers in the room with you when you're having conversations internally or whatever you're doing. You have to put the customer first. And also, I think for business owners, you've got to kind of get rid of your ego and get out of your own way. Chris and I are very good at bringing in people that are better than us at doing specific tasks, or will train us to be the best people we can in our defined areas. So I think we've always been able to step out of our own way, get the right people in, and drive a business forward, and had a very customer centric approach, which has really allowed the growth.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, and again, I appreciate you've given up over an hour of your time today. You've stepped out of a very busy business to give freely of your time and energy and experience to the listeners, the global community of MSPs. And that's something that I've observed you do again and again and again during your journey. So, 20 years you're doing it. I hope the next however many years you are hugely successful. In fact, I've got no doubt you're going to be as well. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Chris. I'll ask you both in turn. So first, Chris, if anybody listening wants to connect with you and continue the conversation, where can they find you online?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. So, just search my name, Chris Gorman, and we can chat over there.
Yeah, Daniel, how about you? Where do you hang out?
I am on LinkedIn, but I do like speaking to people. And if it's people in the community, other business owners, maybe not suppliers that are trying to sell me that I've not got existing relationships with, but ring the office and speak to me. If you own an MSP, or you're managing an MSP, or you're working in an MSP and you want some advice, I like talking to people. Pick up the phone, ring the office, I will speak to you.
Fantastic. We'll include all of Daniel and Chris's contact details in the show notes of this episode, so you can get to tubblog.co.uk for the accompanying blog post for this episode. But Daniel, Chris, this has been phenomenal. I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. I know you're becoming old hands being on camera and doing these type of interviews now.
You keep collaring us, Richard, at events.
Well, you mentioned earlier how you just sort of collar your employees coming out of the toilet and saying, you got 5 minutes. That's exactly what I did to you. And that's exactly what I do with all the guests on this show. Yeah, so there you go.
More relaxed then, it's better, isn't it? Yeah,
Richard, it's been very enjoyable chatting to you. It's been
thank you. And again, thank you both for all that you do for the managed service community. It's not to be underestimated. And it's thanks to people like you that this community is so much fun to work in, and you help so many other people thrive. So I appreciate you both. Thank you.